now is to make it to April when he'll turn 100.
Fingers crossed. That's amazing. Welcome, everyone, from Facebook and YouTube. We're here with a great conversation with Josh Cannon and his new book tonight, and celebrating the Marine Corps birthday. So happy birthday, Marines. Let's get the music playing.
Big
Let
250.
everybody in.
I was a little bit afraid you were going to play the Marine Corps hymn, Halls of Montezuma, and make us all stand at the position of attention.
Maybe Brad will make us do that.
That might make us do that. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Veterans Breakfast Club. I'm Todd DiPastino. I'm the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and we've been around for 17 years holding conversations like this around veterans and their stories. And tonight, of course, is a special event because it is November 10th, and it is the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. And to recognize that day, we're not going to have a cake. We're not going to have a ceremony. Instead, we're going to have a conversation with Operation Iraqi Freedom Marine veteran Josh Cannon about his new book, Fatal Second Helen, Modern Veterans Iliad. And this will be a fascinating conversation. Before we get started, I do want to recognize we have Russ Freeberg with us. Russ, thank you for joining us. I think you win the prize for the oldest veteran in the room. How old are you, Russ?
I'm 102 and 8 months.
102 and 8 months.
So I'm closer to 103 now than 102.
That's okay, Russ. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. When you were assigned the Iliad in school, did you actually read it?
Well, I've read it a couple of times.
See, that's
Wow.
wonderful, because I'm not sure, Josh and I were talking, we're not sure how many people, many of us were probably assigned it, including me in ninth grade. I don't remember reading it. Um, and it's not that I think that people here should read it, but they should know about it. And Josh's book, which we're going to be discussing, is just a wonderful kind of tour through this really rich and very important story that once you get into it, I think reads remarkably modern. It doesn't read like some ancient text. It reads like something that we could relate to. So we're going to get into that conversation. But first, I do want to recognize the Marine Corps birthday. Let's have Brad. We have Brad and Kevin. Brad Washball, Kevin Horgan, two Marine veterans. Um, what is the practice, Brad and Kevin, at a Marine Corps ball? And why aren't you at a Marine Corps ball tonight?
Well, I'd go if there was one close. I think, most areas probably have one. Recruiting stations hold one, but I have celebrated informally with my Marine friends today, exchanging text and images and stories and whatnot. We still keep in touch with my rifle company from Hawaii in 1980s. And it's just a sense of camaraderie and connecting and reconnecting with your comrades. The Marine Corps birthday, as you know, is steeped in tradition.
Yes.
And there are ceremonies that follow a certain protocol. And, as you wrote in the bulletin, the Marine Corps history is quite interesting, and how the birthdays came about to be celebrated. The 1920s were pretty pivotal, Todd, from a historical perspective, wouldn't you say?
I would say so, but that's not the origin that we're marking today. We're marking the origin from this remarkable meeting in this place that was a bar, correct?
Right. Yeah, Tun Tavern in Philadelphia. It's a matter of lore too. There's been some question about, is that the actual birthplace? But a tavern's not a bad place to start
I was going to say, Brad, there's no debate that the Marine Corps began in a bar,
Right.
just whether it was this bar or another bar.
Yeah, you might find several Marines in several bars within a radius of that. So,
And so a big part of the Marine Corps birthday is the cake, right? There's a big
yes.
cake.
Yeah, the cake cutting. And, usually what you'll see is the oldest and the youngest Marines be part of the ceremony where the cake is cut with a sword, and the oldest Marine present and the youngest Marine present pass down the slices of cake as to represent the traditions of passing the legacies of the Marine Corps from one generation to the next.
And look how
Yeah.
how this tradition is upheld even in this war zone. And remember, November 10th, 1950 would have been in some of the most dire and harshest combat of the Korean War. And there's Chesty Puller, with the sword cutting a cake for the Marine Corps birthday. It's that important a ritual, that important a ceremony to Marines.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? I mean, other service branches have their birthdays. Why do the Marines make a bigger deal of their birthday than the other branches do? Is there any?
I think it's what attracts people to join the Marine Corps, to be part of something like our history and our traditions. It's a tough organization with high standards, and these ceremonies just remind people of the type of organization they've joined. I've heard somebody say a lot of the others, this is not to disparage other services, but they see it more of as a career or whatnot. In the Marine Corps, it's more of a calling.
Yeah.
Calling to a warrior class.
That's absolutely. Yep.
And that type of distinction runs deep in Marines, because it's, frankly, to make the cut as a Marine is quite challenging.
Kevin Horgan from Atlanta, what do you have to say?
I agree with everything the Colonel says. Even if he was lying flat out, I would agree with him. I must say, though, that Marines don't throw parties on Monday nights.
Right.
We just don't. So the parties that the Colonel went to, and I went, and Matt May is on right now. You can unmute him because he's full of beans too. He's on the board of Atlanta. He's an enlisted Marine vet, and he's a solid friend, solid citizen. We throw parties on Fridays and Saturdays, and they usually last into the following day. That's all I really need to add to what the Colonel said. Everything he said is gospel truth. It really is it's a matter of tradition. I have to say this, though. I think the older we get, the more important it becomes. When I was a young Marine, it was just, or it was something we had to go to. We had to get another thing to get ready for.
Yep.
But the older we get, the more important it is to us.
Mhm.
And
Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, happy birthday, Matt. What do you have anything to add? Oh, we don't. We can't hear him. His microphone is off.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. Yes. Happy birthday, Matt.
Awesome, thank you. No, as far as the whole thing of being born in a bar and Ton Tavern, it's just like the whole camaraderie thing. But also, I've lost a lot of brothers in war and behind, and ultimately, the way that we celebrate each other are with a drink or two, right? So, it's kind of weird being born in a bar as far as a distinguished military force. However, I can totally see how that works out. And again, Kevin, thank you for joining, bringing me on board. And again, if there's any other Marines, Uran Semper Fi.
The other thing, Matt, and we're going to get to Josh and his book shortly, but I think the other thing is that the Marines emphasize, and all the branches do, but I think there's a real emphasis in the ceremony for the birthday that when you're a Marine, you're a part of something that has been there long before you showed up and will be there long after you leave the scene. And that your role is simply to carry the tradition through. take the baton, hold it very briefly, and pass it off to the next generation. And there's a real emphasis in the ceremony of that, the oldest and the youngest. There's something really, really profound. And Kevin, I think, and I'm being very serious here, I think the older you get, the more that you do see that your life is entwined in this long story of history, and that, you're here for a brief moment, but you're part of something much bigger. And that's what kind of ennobles life in a way. And I think the Marines are really good at commemorating that sense.
I had to tell you, Todd, I was nothing special. All right. I served for 5 years, who's essentially a cup of coffee compared to most of the other people here who have served. And it was a great privilege of my life. There's no other way to put it. If I was never shot at, nothing special, but being part of something greater has been wonderful. It really has been.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to my good friend Armand Kinslow, who he and I were in OCS and Basic back in 79 and 80. And Armand has a long and distinguished career in the Marine Corps. He happens to be on. We don't want him to talk, though, because he really talks too much.
Armand, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I just want to wish everyone a happy 250th birthday.
And I'm going to show you just how magnanimous, that means generous, our Navy veterans are. Chris Parolo would like to pay tribute to Marines, and he's a Navy vet. Isn't that something? Chris, I think you're really you're really kind of showing the best of what the Navy has to offer tonight.
Well, thank you very much, and happy birthday to the Marine Corps. I was on board my old ship, the USS Little Rock, about 5 weeks ago, and had a chance to visit the Fleet Marine compartment. We had 50 Marines aboard for various duties, and I went down to their compartment, and it had been turned into a tribute and a museum to the Marine Corps and the Fleet Marine. This is just one of the exhibits that is occupying that space right now. There are a couple other wonderful pictures there, Todd. I don't know if you have a couple more up. This is, imagine now this filled with racks, canvas racks. I think it was about 50 Marines on board there. You can see they claimed the space with that wonderful Marine Corps symbol in the tile of the floor there. That's original. Other aspects of other aspects of the room there, other displays concerning the Fleet Marines. There you see the types of bunks that they had, and a wonderful plaque that's on the wall dedicated to, it says, in honor of all Marines who have served aboard this gallant ship, presented by the United States Seagoing Marine Association. And I went down there to take a look, and I was very, very proud to see that the Navy, the Naval Park in general there, paid tribute to the Fleet Marines and their role in this at sea in all types of craft. This was a flagship, so with special weapons. So we had 50 aboard for both diplomatic and security duties. And although I did not mingle very much with the Marines there, they were a presence aboard there, and we were gratified to have them. Now, coincidentally, this space is co-located with the small arms locker and also the brig. So you've got the small arms locker in one corner of this space, and you have the brig in the other corner of that space. And I think it's only fitting that the Marines have charge or overview of those two particular spaces on board the ship. So that was an interesting discovery. But if the Marines are a fraternity, this is my viewpoint based on, since I was a teenager here and observing Marines here. The Marines are a fraternity within the broader fraternity of veterans. And you have to look at them special. I was with Marines today at a veterans event. It was a mixed crowd, of course, in general there. But wherever I go, you know who the Marines are, and they are proud of it. And you are correct. Of all the services, I'm thinking about boot camps as a model there. Of all the services, I think the word of the year now is warrior ethos. And of all the services, if you look at the training from day one, the Marines truly concentrate on the pure warrior. Okay, no distractions of technical this, aircraft, ships, tanks, etc. They concentrate on being the true warriors, and we put them in that position every time we deploy them to a beach or any station that they are. And I want to pay tribute to them because, Todd, are we permitted to play a clip from C-SPAN? Would that violate anything?
Probably copyrighted.
Really?
It might be
shame.
copyrighted, but I'm not sure if it's in public domain or not.
All right, then I will quote this, okay? Wonderful clip from the celebration in October. It was Lieutenant General Roberta L. Shea. She is the commanding general of the Fleet Marine Force Atlantic and Marine Corps Forces North. She was speaking, and she said, after this wonderful tribute to the Marines, "We serve as partners with our brothers and sisters in the Navy and could not be more proud of our service alongside them. So, despite all the ribbing, the kidding, the jokes, both profane and comical, I believe every sailor respects them as our brothers and sisters in green, and the partnership we've had from Tripoli to Iwo Jima to Bella Wood to now as we serve together there. So I just want to say happy birthday, United States Marine Corps, tip of the spear, and proud to be partners with you in protecting the nation and literally the world whenever we need to. So that's all.
Thank you, Chris. What a wonderful, eloquent tribute to the United States Marine Corps and the Marines on this program. Thank you very much, Chris, for that. Before we go on to Josh, I do want to remind people we do have another program coming up on Thursday night. Glenn Flickinger, what are we going to be talking about Thursday night?
We are going to be talking about another book about World War II cemeteries. We had Richard Sherman on early this year, late last year, I can't remember for sure, who had an excellent book out about World War II cemeteries. This one has a little different, actually quite a different twist to it. And then it's about brothers that were killed in World War II that are buried in the same cemetery. This is something I never understood, never knew, but the parents, the loved ones of the deceased could request that the brothers be buried in the same cemetery. And the Army went to quite lengths to make that happen in some cases. In one case that we'll talk about, one brother was killed in the European theater and another in the Pacific theater. And the two are in the Manila cemetery. So,
Wow.
And there's 3 pairs of brothers in this book from the Pittsburgh area that we're going to talk about. So that's Thursday night. Should be very interesting.
And this is with author Kevin Callahan, whose book is Brothers in Arms, Remembering Brothers Buried Side by Side in American World War II Cemeteries. And then we're back Monday night. And Glenn, you'll be on this one also because we're going to be discussing our upcoming trip to Italy. That is the Italian War campaign tour that we're going to be having in October of 2026. You're going to be on the tour. I'm going to be on the tour. And Professor David D'Andrea, who's the historian of the 45th Infantry Division, is also coming on the tour. It'll be a trip. We're going to really circumnavigate. Is that the word? It's not circumnavigate.
We're going to go around the outside of
We're going to go around the outside of Sicily. That's it. And then go over to the boot and then up the boot to Rome.
On land.
On land. Right.
I don't know, can you scroll that up a little bit and show Sicily? I'm not seeing Sicily.
Well, no, I can't scroll it up a little bit, Glenn. This is not like a regular map. This is like a made for the program.
I just want to remind you, the mob lives in Sicily. So next time, let's show Sicily.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about the trip. We're going to be talking about the Italian campaign. I'm going to be talking about Bill Mauldin's role in the Italian campaign. David will be talking about the role of the of the 45th Infantry Division, and among Glenn's many areas of expertise is the Italian campaign in World War II. So we're going to talk all about that. That's a week from tonight, November 17th. And I also, Josh Cannon, who I kind of rudely a few weeks ago, here, let me tell you what happened. All right. I originally scheduled Josh Cannon, Marine, for tonight. And then a couple weeks ago, I said, Josh, I want to bump you. I want to move you off the schedule because we have a Marine who's 100 years old. His name is Stuart McDonald. He's one of the last, if not the last, Marine veteran of the Battle of Guadalcanal. We'd like to schedule him to come on. And we had scheduled him to come on.
Yeah.
And he passed away.
Yeah.
And before we could get him on. And we're very sad about that. But Josh, when Josh came on before we went live here, Josh said, we should pay tribute to Stuart McDonald, a Marine who we didn't get to talk with. So Glenn, did you talk to him at all?
No. We scheduled it. I had a preparatory meeting scheduled with him and one of the people that helps him, and I got the email that he had passed. So no, I never had the chance to. This Stuart McDonald was a Guadalcanal Marine, and I haven't been able, yes, and I haven't been able to research it, but I can't imagine there's very many other Guadalcanal era Marines still alive. So it's a real shame. Yeah. And this has happened a couple times to us now. We've made contact with a World War II veteran, try to schedule it as quick as we can, but not quick enough.
Right. So we're sad that we didn't get to talk to Stuart, but we're happy to have Josh Cannon on with us. Josh, thank you again for your patience. Thank you for being willing to be booted and then re-invited back on. This is really special, Josh, to have you because you're a little weird. You are I mean, come on. The guy's a Marine. And then he gets out of the Marine Corps, he goes to college, and then he gets a PhD in anthropology and archaeology and becomes a classics scholar. He's now at the University of Pittsburgh. He's the director of research at a honors college at the University of Pittsburgh, but he's also on the faculty of the classics department and I believe anthropology department. And this is a book that you wrote, and I want to show people the cover of the book. This is a book that you wrote, Fatal Second Helen, a modern veteran's Iliad. And I asked you, look at this wonderful cover with the Greek motif and helicopters behind it. You have a Marine here to the right, and then an ancient Greek or Trojan here to the left. And you get the sense that this is a book that kind of reaches back to history for something really important to Josh and really important to the reader. Josh, how would you characterize the Iliad as a book? What for those of us who haven't read it or aren't familiar with it, why is it important?
Well, it's the earliest book in the Western world, right? So in the Near East and in China and in South Asia, people had been writing books that precede the Iliad, but for the inheritors of the Greek and Roman culture, this is it. This is the first book. And because it was the first book, the Greeks and the Romans loved it. And so it had a big impact on their culture and the way they think about it. Now, fast forwarding today, why should it be interesting to us, or why could it be interesting to us? Well, if you like Greek mythology, it is Greek mythology. It's the beginning of Greek mythology. It's rich with stories, and Zeus is doing these things, and Apollo and Ares and Athena, they're doing those things. And for the veterans, it's one of the earliest stories of war, and it's, I would say, the story of war that had the greatest impact on every warrior, soldier, Marine, sailor, etc. After it came into existence, right? So I mentioned in my book, and we talked about this earlier, Alexander the Great loved the Iliad. He saw himself as the next Achilles. Julius Caesar was raised on the Iliad, like all Romans were of his time period. You can almost pick any famous general and he's probably read the Iliad and thought about it in some way because it's a core text about war. If anything, it's the core text about war because it's the oldest. Well, again, not exactly the oldest. If we're going to be very, very specific about it, it's not exactly the oldest, but it is one of the oldest texts about war that we have. And then the last thing I'll say in answer to that question is it's not just, oh, this guy killed this guy and then he got revenge and then the army went this way and then they attacked the wall. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of good battles. There's a lot of build up to when the best Trojan fights the best Greek. But it also really forces you to look at the horror of war, the pain of war, the way people who love other people suffer because of war. And so because it has that piece, that depth, that emotional depth, this is something I read about in the book. I actually think you could perceive the book as anti-war. It is the classical text about war, the one of the formative texts, and yet the amount of misery that the Iliad presents to its audience is so intense and so emotional and so brilliantly conveyed for a 2,700-year-old piece of writing that you have to ask yourself, is that the point? Is that what I'm supposed to walk away with when I read this book? That actually, this is all terrible.
And the book, as far as we know, was written maybe 2,800 years ago, somewhere, written down.
Mhm.
But it had probably been passed down through oral tradition for centuries, correct?
Yes.
And it was depicting events that probably occurred 32, 3,300 years ago, somewhere in that
Exactly.
range. We're pretty sure, my understanding is because of archaeological evidence, we're fairly sure that this so-called Trojan War that destroyed the city of Troy, which is in modern day Turkey,
Mhm.
did occur, that there was a horrific war that lasted a long time. It destroyed Troy, right? Is that the
Well,
understanding now?
yes. In my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of scholars, yeah, I would agree that the preponderance of evidence is that something happened. Yeah. The archaeology of Troy shows signs of destruction. There's weapons on the ground. There's not mass burials, but large burial grounds. So clearly something happened. And another piece of evidence, the archaeological remains of Troy that date to this period, 3,200 years ago, have massive walls. And people don't build walls for no reason, right? They're building walls because they're expecting someone to come try to get them. So, and then the Hittites, the people that I studied from my dissertation, the Hittites are just to the east of the Trojans. They write about battles happening all up and down the Aegean coast in Western Turkey. They don't write about a battle that you could pin to the Trojan War, but the whole area was rife with war and battle. So I think, and I write a little bit about this in the book, I think the burden of proof would be on people that want to say it didn't happen.
Right. So this may have been one of the oldest of the recorded wars
Mhm.
that occurred in a very war-torn region,
Mhm.
3,000 or 4,000 years ago. And it gets the story of this war gets layered into the stories of the gods, that what we would now call the pagan gods from antiquity. And the gods are these transpersonal forces, these forces that we might, if you wanted to do a kind of a psychological interpretation of the Iliad, we would see the gods as forces working within us, working within humanity. We have feelings of aggression, we have feelings of love, we have feelings of adventure, and they're all kind of personified in these gods that play around with humanity during the course of the Iliad. So it became much more, the Iliad became much more than just kind of like a history of the war. It became something akin, you might say, to the ancients, to a Bible, something that you learned from how to live your life, right?
Yeah, I think the Bible analogy is really smart. As you mentioned, the Iliad was an oral poem, an oral tradition that one generation taught the next generation for hundreds of years, up until around 800 BC, when somebody, Homer, we say, wrote it down for the first time. And the Bible is similar, right? The Bible was an oral tradition, especially the Torah, the first five books, the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Old Testament was an oral tradition. until about a little bit later than the Iliad, maybe 500 BC. I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm a little bit fuzzy there. And so they have very similar origins. They emerge into their cultures at roughly the same time. And in the similar way that the Bible is a very powerful cultural and educational tool to our culture today, the Iliad was that for the Greeks and the Romans. So the reason Alexander the Great saw himself as the new Achilles was because he had been raised on this book and been taught this book and believed that to be a successful, admirable man in society, you acted like they acted in the Iliad. So there were moral tales spun out of this book that Homer wrote, which I don't necessarily know was. I think the Bible is maybe the Bible is trying to teach you what to do, what not to do. The Iliad's not really doing that, but it had such a control
Yes, such a
over these
grip.
audiences that
Yes.
they said, well, if Achilles did it, it must be the way to be, or if Odysseus or Agamemnon or Hector, like these are the pinnacles of human beings, and so we should strive to behave like they behaved.
And what makes it I think the grip that it has on the reader is what makes it seem so modern, because it's not real, it's not an epic. The Trojan War, Josh, and again, correct me for when I'm wrong here, but the Trojan War supposedly lasted for 10 years. It's not like you don't begin the book on day one of the war and end it on Victory Day. It's the Iliad tells the story of just a few days, right? At the very end of the war.
Exactly. I should know this off the top of my head, but it's about 4 or 5 days of fighting. And there's spaces in between. From the very beginning of the Iliad to the very end is about 50 some days. And within those 50 days are, as I just said, only a handful of days where they're actually fighting each other. Troy does not fall in the Iliad. The Iliad ends and Troy's doing just fine. It lost Hector, its greatest defender. That's not good for Troy. But the city still stands. Achilles is still alive. There's no Trojan horse. All those stories are part of this cycle, is part of this tradition. But the Iliad is looking at just a little tiny window.
It's amazing. I mean, I just think you could almost picture like a movie director today doing that, choosing just a little episode in order to get an intimate story of individuals in this larger conflagration that is just destroying the region. And the look at who are the individuals that the Iliad really kind of focuses on, and their emotions, their subjective experience of war.
So I think that's a really interesting question, because most people would say Achilles is the main hero, and that's a pretty easy argument to defend. He is the Rambo of the unstoppable force.
The badass.
Yeah. He's got the gear up scene, just like a lot of action movies have, where they open up. I mean, he didn't have a locker, but where the hero opens up a locker and there's like 50 guns and he's just pulling them out of and putting them in his, all over himself, and putting armor, putting his bandolier on, etc. The Iliad has that, and it's Achilles that gets it, right? The focus is very much on Achilles. And when Achilles doesn't fight in the Iliad, so the Iliad is 24 books long. Achilles doesn't fight until the 18th book, right? So we have to wait a while to see this guy go to action. But like a good action movie that kind of makes you wait to see stuff happen, when Achilles starts fighting, it's breathtaking. And you've already seen a lot of fighting. You've seen a lot of really tough guys do tough guy things, but Achilles washes it all away. And so it's really easy to say, Alexander the Great thought Achilles, an expert of war, as great as any military mind has ever existed. He was like, Achilles is the guy. And I can't argue with everything I just said, but I do read, if you want to read the Iliad from a more sensitive point of view, your mind really focuses on Hector. So Achilles is the top fighter among the Greeks who are attacking the city of Troy. Hector is the top fighter among the Trojans. And I really believe that Homer is trying to portray Hector in the most human and accessible and emotional way possible, so that when he fights Achilles towards the end of the Iliad, the climax of the book, the two greatest warriors face off against each other, and Achilles defeats him, the reader has to struggle with those emotions. Like, I'm not supposed to like Hector. He's not the good guy. Achilles is the good guy. But I struggle with the death of Hector because he was a good guy. Maybe not the protagonist good guy, but there's a scene, I love this scene, and I spent some time on it. There's a scene where he goes back to the city in the middle of a battle, and he's looking for his wife, Andromache, and he finds her, and his baby, Astyanax, is there just a little bit. We don't know how old he is, but like a year old, 6 months old. And the baby starts to cry because Hector is wearing his helmet with the big horse plume sticking up. And so he immediately takes his helmet off so he can comfort his son.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's happening there is Homer is pausing the story of war to show us this little scene of Hector and his wife and his son. And here's this guy, the best, the most, as you said, the most badass fighter among the Trojans, comforting his son by basically taking the military side of himself away to be a father instead of a killer, instead of a fighter. Achilles doesn't get anything like that. Well, okay, let me be careful. We do see an emotional side of Achilles. When his best friend Patroclus gets killed, he is completely destroyed emotionally. And there's another, Achilles' most touching scene. He's sitting on the beach, and the ghost of Patroclus comes to him and says, "It's time for you to bury me. You've put this off for too long." And Achilles reaches out to touch him because he wants the comfort of his friend, and he's not there because he's a ghost. And you read that and you're just like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling so sad? Like Achilles kind of he brought it onto himself, right? That's kind of that's one of the major messages of, I would argue, of the Iliad, that Achilles, because of his pride, brought upon the death of his closest friend. And so you kind of don't necessarily you can admire him, but maybe not like him. But when he reaches out for the ghost of his friend and there's nothing there, you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. So it's a loaded question. As my long answer indicates, it's a loaded question. Who is the main character of the Iliad? It has to be Hector or Achilles, and most people would say Achilles, and I can't argue with that. But there is a conversation to be had that Hector is in there too.
The commanding general of the Greek forces, and again, the Trojan War is a war against these united Greek cities and armies against the city of Troy in Turkey. And 1,000 ships, right, sail off for Turkey to besiege Troy. They spend 10 years doing it. And they do it because Troy has stolen the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get to Helen and all that in a little bit, but that's the trigger for this war. And the commanding general of all these Greek forces, and again, you're going to correct me, and you should, because he's not, as you point out, not really a commanding general, but he's a commanding general of the Greek forces for all intents and purposes. Mm-hmm. His name is Agamemnon. And what is Agamemnon like?
So he's the richest and the most powerful king of the Greeks, which is why when they all sail to Troy together, he gets to be the boss. And yeah, commanding general is obviously not a term that the ancient Greeks would have maybe thought about. They would have said he's the chief of the kings or the first of the kings, etc. And there is no real general. There's no strategy in the Iliad, which I think is Alexander the Great, a brilliant tactician, right? One of the greatest ever. Loves the Iliad, a story with no tactics, no strategy whatsoever. And so Agamemnon, yeah, he's the commanding general, absolutely. But that just means that people listen to what he tells them to do, and all he tells them to do is, all right, let's go fight. That's it. There's no, nothing more to it. He is not, the Iliad doesn't really like him. He's not presented in a good way. In the very beginning of the Iliad, he takes Briseis, this woman that Achilles was keeping, because Achilles kind of mouthed off to him. And that's why Achilles doesn't fight until book 18, because he's so angry that Agamemnon would insult him in this way, damage his pride by taking what he viewed as his possession. And so the fact that Agamemnon did that and allowed Achilles to walk away is just insane. No commanding general could possibly let the greatest fighter or the greatest force walk away. And then he gets punished for it. The Greeks start to lose the Trojan War. The Trojans are pushing and pushing and pushing, and without Achilles, the Greeks can't hold the Trojans back. And the Greeks go to Agamemnon and say, you've got to apologize. You've got to fix this. He goes, okay, fine, I'll fix it. But he never apologizes. He tries to give the girl back, he tries to bribe Achilles, but he'll never admit that he was a jerk. And so, as a commanding officer, he's the type that nobody would want to have.
Very much so. He's all about Agamemnon is all about Agamemnon. He's not he's not about the core, he's not about the mission, he's not about the team, he comes across to me as a real jerk. And and Achilles is kind of like he's like the best. Achilles is being generous to support Agamemnon in this war, right? Because Achilles is this fierce warrior, and if you have Achilles on your side, you're going to win the war no matter what. And Achilles says, "You can't win this war without me. Why are you treating me like dirt?" All right. Maybe I'm dumbing it down too much, but that's
that's. I mean, it's all about pride,
it's all about pride. That's
and
it.
I think that's one of the big differences. So again, I just talked about the Iliad as this formative text about war. All of the veterans in the audience tonight are going to recognize, if they haven't already or are already thinking about it, are going to recognize that while there absolutely is glory in the modern day military, everything is done as a team, as a platoon, as a squad, as whatever term you want to use, as a fire team. Since Marine Corps birthday, we'll use the term fire team. Everyone's working together in coordinated efforts. That's why we have formations. That's why we have uniformity in our uniforms and the way our hair is cut and the way we get paid and the way we wear our medals. Everything is done together. The Iliad is kind of the opposite of that. The Iliad is all about everyone's doing what they want to do, and they're all competing with each other to be the best at that thing.
Yes.
And so Achilles has to be the best. That's what defines him. He doesn't save anybody. He doesn't save anybody's life. He only takes the lives of his enemies. It doesn't occur to him to go back and save the Greeks who are dying because he's chosen not to fight, because he wants them to be punished because Agamemnon insulted him. So, and Jonathan Shea, a psychiatrist, a very famous researcher, and I'm sure I think you talked about him in your Odysseus in Vietnam. Well, he has got a book, Odysseus in America, about homecoming, and he's got a book called Achilles in Vietnam. And he points to Agamemnon as like, this is a bad leader, and they still exist, and people are still suffering on these types of behaviors. But there is still a gap, even though there's those commonalities, and Shea is brilliant at pointing them out. There is still a significant gap. Achilles. Well, I'll use another example. A lot in the audience might remember, be familiar with the Bravo Foxtrot, the Blue Falcon. There's another way to use that acronym, but it involves a swear word. But that, at least I was in the Marine Corps from 2000 to 2005, so I'm on the younger side of this audience, I think. But when I was in, that was one of the greatest insults that you could give to somebody, by calling them a Bravo Foxtrot, because it meant that you were in it for yourself, or it meant that you would betray, you wouldn't protect, you didn't have the back of the people you were serving with, right? And in today's military, it's one of the worst things you can do. It's going to get you hated. It's going to get you beaten up. It's not good at all. In the Iliad, that was it. In the Iliad, being in it for yourself was what everybody admired, because they were all chasing after individual glory. And so it's a really stark difference between the way Homer depicts warfare and the way we live warfare today.
Yeah. Is the Iliad critical of that kind of self-centered attitude?
So it isn't. It isn't. Not in my opinion. It does. So Achilles is the extreme version of it, and he does get punished. As I said, he loses his best friend, and he is devastated by the loss. And so there is a way, I think, to say, well, this is what happens when you take it too far.
Right.
And so that's the closest I would say the Iliad comes to critiquing or arguing against this kind of glorification. But at the same time, everybody knows that after the Iliad ends, the Greeks go right back to fighting. And so even though Achilles loses his best friend, and even though he has this kind of emotional moment where he has to give Hector's body, after he kills Hector, he takes his body because he wants to abuse it. He's so angry that, and I don't think I mentioned this, Hector is the one that kills his best friend.
Yeah.
Hector kills Patroclus. So after Achilles kills Hector, he takes his body and he purposely abuses it to disrespect it. And then Hector's father, the king of Troy, Priam, he sneaks into the Trojan camp and sneaks into Achilles' tent and begs Achilles to give his son back.
That's
And
such
Achilles,
such a
oh, it's
moving.
incredible. It's one of the saddest scenes of the Iliad because Achilles and Priam are sitting in Achilles' tent together. And there's this really famous line where Priam kisses Achilles' hands. He goes, "I've kissed the hands of the man who killed my son."
Right.
And you're like, oh my gosh. And then he reminds Achilles of his own father, and they both start weeping. And so you could argue that I wouldn't call it a moment of catharsis or a moment of learning, but you can see Achilles weeping for another person for the first time. Because other than this, he's all been about himself. When Patroclus dies, he's sad for himself. He's sad that Achilles no longer has his best friend. So then Priam, the king of Troy, sneaks all across the plain and through the Greek walls of the wooden camp and into Achilles' tent. It's this really tremendous and brave thing to do, and Achilles is stunned to see it, and he gives Hector, the body of Hector, back to Priam, and he says, "Take as long as you want to bury him." So Priam ends up taking 11 days, and the Iliad ends with the end of this funeral, the funeral of Hector. The last line of the Iliad is, "And so they buried Hector, tamer of horses," hard end. But anybody who read the Iliad knew that the next day, Achilles put his armor back on and went out to kill everybody purposefully to make himself look better. And so you're like, did he learn something? It's a hard question, right? Did he come away? Did Achilles change? Did Achilles have an arc in the Iliad? Again, kind of yes, but kind of no.
It reminds me of the Christmas truce of 1914, where you take a day or two or three off of war, meet in no man's land, and then, after the December 26th comes, you go back to your sides and you blow a whistle and the war starts again,
There is, yeah, I would agree. There's a piece to this, but yeah.
It's a moment of mercy. The book ends with a moment of mercy. Let's talk again. I want to remind people this is Josh Cannon's new book, Fatal Second Helen, a modern veteran's Iliad. And I want to get into the modern veteran part, because we've been listening to Josh Cannon, the scholar, but this is Josh Cannon, the Marine. And when was this picture taken and where, Josh?
So that's, I want to say that's April 2003, might have been early May. And so we had just gotten to I was part of the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and we had gotten to Baghdad. We basically went straight to Baghdad. I was with Regimental Combat Team 1. And then after we had secured Baghdad, we came back down to Hilla, a major city south of Baghdad in the Babel province. And it's called the Babel province because the ancient city of Babylon is there. And this is a picture of me on my way to visit the ruins of Babylon. And Saddam Hussein had a palace built on this hill that overlooked the ruins of Babylon. So we got to spend a day in that palace. It was kind of a weird thing to think about, but almost as tourists. We just said, yeah, go check it out. Go look around, wander around, and see what there's to see. And there's two things I really like about this picture. One, my left hand there, you can see I haven't showered for a couple months because it's just this gnarly, dirty thing. And then below it, you can just barely see on my helmet the Arabic word al-medfa, which is Arabic for the cannon.
Oh, the cannon. And yet, so you were a linguist, correct?
That's right. So I was it was called an Arabic cryptologic linguist, Marine Corps MOS 2671. So they sent me to school to study Arabic, and then they sent me to Iraq to discreetly listen in on wireless communication or just people speaking, and report on what they were saying.
And what were they saying?
There wasn't a lot of emission there. We did capture some intel that ended up being very useful, but not a lot. And so very quickly, our commanders recognized that, yeah, because ostensibly I was there to intercept military communications and say, they're moving over here, they're preparing an ambush over there. This is how many to expect when we get to the other side of the city. Never got intel like that because the Iraqi army collapsed shortly after we invaded the country. So then I was like, okay, well then let's listen to, they had a cellular network that was analog. So their cellular network was very easy for us to capture. No encryption, no digitization. And so then it was almost like, well, let's kind of get a sense, if they're not going to talk about when they're going to attack us next, why don't we get a sense of how they feel about us? Are they angry at us? Are they happy with us? And so it became much more of the intel collection was much more about moods and opinions.
Vibe check, we would call it today.
I'm sorry.
We would call it today a vibe check.
Sure. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, even in that situation, they weren't saying very much. They would say, "Oh, the Americans came through today," or "Oh, do you hear this gunfire? Oh, do you hear the explosions? Like, get down, be careful." But there wasn't a lot of action. Well, there was almost no actionable intelligence. And there wasn't even a lot of intelligence that actually helped us build a bigger picture. So I ended up being used. So there's a difference between interpretation and translation. I was sent to be a translator, which means someone who takes a text or an audio text or a written text and translates it into English. But I ended up being an interpreter much more often, which is somebody who is speaking in the language or interpreting from one language to another, because there just wasn't much of a translation mission.
Oh,
and there they are. There's the ruins of Babylon.
wow.
And what you can see behind them, so there's the crumbly bits. Behind the crumbly bits is a much better looking selection of walls. Saddam Hussein had been rebuilding the city of Babylon, and he was stamping every 100th brick with his initials.
What did you know about antiquity or the ancient world or the cradle of civilization when you were there as a Marine Corps sergeant?
So I knew a little bit. I turned 21 during the invasion, so I was still pretty young. I just had a high school education. I knew a little bit about Hammurabi. I think I knew that Alexander the Great died at Babylon after he came back from his his attempted push into India. And so I had a handful of trivial facts, but I certainly couldn't tell the whole picture of it.
Did you have a sense? I mean, were you aware when you were there that, hey, this is, one of the most ancient places in the world?
Yeah, I was so excited to
You
go.
were excited to go.
Yeah, I was. I thought it was amazing, and I became an archaeologist, not because of this, but I became an archaeologist later. And I often thought to myself, man, if I had the training that I have now, I would have been finding artifacts on the ground all over the place because ancient pottery can often look like regular stone. And so, like you can see here, I'm standing. So there's a raised road, and there's this soil behind me. The archaeologist in me wants to go in there and dig through that soil, and I can almost guarantee that I would find something. But back then, I just didn't have that awareness at all.
So the Marine Corps gave you great training because it taught you how to dig, right? Dig a hole.
Yeah, we had. I mean, so we most of what we dug were what were called scratches. And well, that's a foxhole, which honestly, we dug it for fun because we were bored. When we invaded Iraq, we were often driving north at about 5 miles an hour. Sometimes it was faster, but a lot of times it was slower. And sometimes we would just stop for hours. And so this is one of those times when we're stopping for hours. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go dig because I'm bored and I'm young. And it drives me crazy to look at this now because I can almost guarantee you if I went sifting through that big pile of soil behind me, I'd find something.
Yeah, you'd find something, and there you are ruining this.
Yes, right. That's right.
Dig site. And I want to show this. So tell me about this picture.
This was me trying to keep a sense of humor. I put on every piece of gear, my gas mask, my night vision goggles. I had that's not a I don't know what that knife is. That probably isn't my knife. And obviously a roll of toilet paper. And I was like, I'm just going to wear everything all at once. And this is once again an example. Everyone in this room is going to be familiar with this of the hurry up and wait element of the military, where there's just a lot of downtime, a lot of boredom. So I was like, well, if I'm going to be bored, I'm going to get dressed up.
Awesome, Steve. Here you are.
Yeah, that's another one. Oh, it drives me crazy to look at this picture because I'm like, oh, there's stuff down there. There's definitely stuff down there. And here's the entrance to Saddam's palace at the top of the hill that overlooks the ruins of Babylon.
Mm.
And then this is my, like, once again, the underlying theme here is I'm often very dirty and I'm often very bored.
So this is just something that you built.
Yeah, so this is my second deployment to Iraq. I went back to Iraq in 2004 with the 2-4 Marine Expeditionary Unit. And we were waiting for a convoy to leave, and it was supposed to leave at, I don't know, like 0700, and it ended up leaving at 1700 or something like that. And so we just sat in this parking lot all day, and I'm sure a lot of veterans in the room have done the same thing in their own way. And there was literally hundreds of tires next to us. I said, well, why not build a tire fort? And then here's where I actually do get to play in the dirt as an archaeologist. So this is, oh gosh, I think this is 2010. Yeah, I'm the dirty, once again, look for the dirtiest guy, and it'll probably be me. This is 2010, and this is in Turkey, where I did most of my excavation as an archaeologist. And this is in Zincirli, which is a very, very small farming village, like one to 200 person farming village, north of Lebanon, right? So pretty south central Turkey. And the surface that we're standing on there, my team here that we're standing on, that's probably a 5 to 6,000 year old surface. So this hole into the ground is looking down over 5 to 6,000 years. And if you look at the wall behind us, you can see these different colors, right? So on the right side, there's that darker brown, that richer brown, just above the guy on the right's head.
Yep.
That's when the city burned down. And that's burnt mud brick because somebody had attacked the city and burned it to the ground. And that is what was left of a completely destroyed city. We call it the burn layer.
Boy, how
So
fascinating.
we were fascinated when we found it, and then we were like, this is horrible. Like these people, I mean, the city was literally burned to the ground. And and this probably would have happened. We think that it happened maybe about 3,000 years ago, something like that. And we're fascinated by it. We're trying to tell the story, but in my mind, I'm also like, this would have been hell. This would have been hell on earth for the people that lived here.
Right. It's just tantalizing for us, or for me, to think about that you were there as a Marine in the invasion and then again in 2004. And that somehow, in my imagination, I connect that with kind of it igniting this curiosity in you that you bring back home, and then you go to college, you get a bachelor's, and then you go on to the University of Chicago, you get your PhD, and you're able to go back, not right to Iraq, but back to the general, the Middle East, and kind of look at this place with new eyes.
Yeah, so that's not exactly the way it went. The linking piece I can say, not I would say, I can say between my time in the military and my time in academia was actually language. Studying Arabic was wonderful. I just thought it was so interesting. And then going to Iraq and being one of the only Americans that could speak Arabic, the Iraqis were fascinated by me. They would just crowd around me and say, "Oh my gosh, can we talk to you? Can we ask you questions? Can you explain this to us?" Like they just were so excited that they had someone that they could communicate with, because 99% of us were not able to do that. And so I think part of my identity developed in that way, and certainly my sense of value and sense of connection with other people. And so when I went to college, I said, I want to do language. Like I want to study linguistics, I want to study languages. And my initial impulse was to do linguistics and computer science. But then I was like, I'm not going to go easy. So I dove into it. I never studied programming. Like a foolish young man, I dove into it was intermediate Java. And I got a D on my first midterm. I was like, oh, I bit off more than I could chew here. Maybe I should have done Introduction to Java, this programming language. And so I completely coincidentally was taking an archaeology course because I always liked archaeology. And I was like, oh, that'll be so much fun to study archaeology, but as like an elective, not as a career. And I'm really, really lucky because the professor that taught the course really liked veterans. And he found out about me and he asked me to give a presentation about the ruins of Babylon to my introduction archaeology course. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Maybe this is what I want to do. So for me, it wasn't linguistics and computers. It became linguistics and archaeology. And so I went to the University of Chicago because their program is very famous for being language heavy. So yes, you're an archaeologist, but we're going to make you study a lot of language while you're becoming an archaeologist. And then my focus became Turkey because linguistically or historically linguistically, Turkey is a fascinating place because, of course, the Greeks lived there and the Hittites, the very ancient people, lived there, and the Mesopotamians were coming through there. So if you could study any language you wanted, any ancient language you wanted, and Turkey probably had those people living there at some point.
I'm going to ask you one more question about the Iliad, and then I want to open it up to other questions and commentary. And I also want to go, we're lucky enough to have your editor, the editor and publisher of Blue Ear Books, Ethan Casey, with us today. I know he's the one a good editor, and I know that Ethan is not a good, he's a great editor. because he and I have worked together before. A great editor pulls a book out of the author.
Yes.
Can see the book that the author has in mind, and works with the author like a good coach. A coach might see a champion in their athlete, pulls out the champion from the athlete, and that's kind of what a good editor does with. And I think that's what he did with you with this book. But I want to ask you, did your time in the Marine Corps then inform how you read the Iliad, which is about war? You're somebody who lived through war, and now you're reading an ancient text about war. Do you think that it gave you special insight into the book?
So yes, yes, I do, and that's why I felt like I was the only person that could write the book that I wrote. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but the number of combat veterans who are also classical scholars is very small. Now, back in World War II in the 1950s, it was actually surprisingly large, but nowadays it is very small. But I had read the Iliad. I actually had read the Iliad in the middle school because I was just a nerdy little kid. And so, and I actually would read different translations to see how they were different from one another. And I remember when Stanley Lombardo's translation came out in like 1996 or thereabouts, and he chose a U-boat, or not a U-boat, but one of the landing craft that stormed that troop transports that were used in the storming of the beach of Normandy. He chose that cover for his Iliad. I was just captivated by that. And so I went into the Marine Corps um, having already read the Iliad, and I think it was very easy for me to divorce the presentation of war that the Iliad has with the actualities of war, because the Iliad it's a myth, it's a mythology. It's got, there's, yes, superhuman. Achilles has a spear that's like the size of a telephone pole,
Yeah.
and he throws rocks that, as Homer tells us, only 3 men today could lift. And so it's already supernatural. It's a Marvel action movie in a sense. And it wasn't until much later that I thought to myself, yeah, but Alexander the Great really liked it, and that guy knew more about war than I did, and his war was a lot closer in time to that of the Iliad than anything that I saw. And I just began to wonder about that, like, well, why? What does this have to say about war? Why is this a valuable text? And I had to kind of dig through.
George Patton loved the Iliad too, right?
Yeah, right. Napoleon, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
Napoleon.
so I had to kind of dig through, I had to kind of push aside the mythology, the superhuman and the godly events, and see the emotion. And that's where I think it is. The Iliad gives you a brilliant and terrible, in a good way, depiction of emotion, of the emotion that war can provoke.
Boy, is that interesting. I know that Kevin Horgan has questions for you. Kevin, please feel free to ask if you'd like. I also want to go to Ethan. Ethan, you read this book in manuscript form, and you're a publisher, you're an editor, you get a lot of manuscripts coming in your mailbox, and a lot of manuscripts are sent to you. You could only publish a tiny fraction of them. What made you want to publish Josh's book? What did you see here that was special and of value?
Todd, for one thing, I think it's that he was an enlisted Marine who went on to become a classic scholar, as you pointed out. Not just that he was a Marine and a combat veteran, but enlisted. And as a publisher, I get to learn for a living. I was reflecting on this since we were talking earlier. What a privilege it is to get to learn for a living. And so I get to sort of pick and choose who I get to learn from. Right. And every book that I do publish, I learn a lot. I'm not a subject matter expert in anything, so I learn. It's like getting to take a college course from somebody who knows what he's talking about. And in Josh's case, that's literal because he's a professor. I was thinking, again, since our earlier conversation before the event started, when I was an undergrad at the University of Wisconsin, I had one particular class, an English class, with one particular professor who walked me through Absalom by William Faulkner. And I had been, prior to that, I grew up totally intimidated by William Faulkner. Like, I could never read William Faulkner and understand what the guy's on about, right? But this professor, William Andrews, who's a very, very great professor, walked us as a class through that novel. And by the end of that, I was like, oh, I get that. And I can go on and read more Faulkner. And I did. And I think Josh does something like that. He's your companion in reading the Iliad. And he's not just any companion. He's not just some guy off the street that you're reading the Iliad with. He really knows, he knows war and he knows the Iliad. He's the best kind of professor in that sense, right? That's what professors should do. They should teach you, and they should leave you feeling enthusiastic and wanting to know more.
I'll tell you, yes, I agree, Ethan.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm sitting here nodding my head because
Yeah.
when I was reading Josh's book, I so enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the voice. I enjoy he's not assuming that you're an expert in this at all. He's not assuming that you know really anything about the Iliad, but he's showing what's important to him in the book. And as I was reading it, I realized, oh, geez, he's a professor. He's looking to get promoted. This book isn't going to get him promoted. This is too fun. You know, books that get you promoted are like difficult to read. They're
Yeah.
they're painful to read. This one, and so I came out and asked him, Josh, I said, Josh, why the heck did you write this book? This is not going to get you tenure. Because it's right. I mean, is that you didn't write this book for professional reasons so much as this is a book that was in you that had to come out.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the book had been kind of mixing around in my mind for years, and I went looking for other people who wrote books or essays like what I wanted to do, and they didn't exist. And I thought, well, yeah, I think I said this a little bit earlier, but maybe I'm the only person that can tell this story. Well, I'm not, okay, maybe
Yeah.
tell the story
Yeah.
isn't the best way to put it, but
Right.
I'm the only person that can put these pieces together the way I can.
Yeah.
Right. That's
It's I want to add a point, Todd, apropos what you said a minute ago, being and you joked that you get tenure by writing books that are hard to read. I hope that's not really true, but as a publisher, part of my mission is bringing books to making books, helping writers write books that are easy to read, without and that help a reader become better educated without realizing that that he's being led by the hand in a good way. And you end up at the end of the book feeling like you've learned something, and that you were smart enough to learn those things. You're not made to feel dumb, you're made to feel smart. And writing a book that reads that way, that's easy to read, is actually really hard to do. It's hard to write a book that's easy to read.
Oh, it is very hard. It's hard to write a book that is easy to read, especially one that's dealing with complex ideas, as this book
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And what I love about this book is it does connect our contemporary world and experience, especially our veterans community, to the ancients, to antiquity, to things that have come long before us, and that we realize that this human condition that we're living in has been around since humanity has been around. And I think, Josh,
Yeah.
it's one of the things that you reveal in the book. Kevin Horgan, you were going to ask something or say something?
No, I have several questions of the professor. I have never read the Iliad. I've read synopses and the like, but and I probably won't. So I have a question. What does Dr. Cannon think is the best English narrative translation that we can read the Iliad and the Odyssey in a form that's not in a poem form, that's in a story form? What do you think is the best?
So that's a good question. There's not a lot of them, actually. But one that I'm a big fan of is by, I believe his name is Bernard Evelson. I read it a long time ago, and it is, as you're requesting, it is not poetic. It is just the text and
Story.
paragraph, and it's also fairly short. So he will give you the story of the Iliad, but he's cut out a lot of those pieces that don't necessarily aren't necessary for the story itself. So that's easily my best recommendation for basically what a prose edition of the Iliad.
Thank you for the prose edition, and I am a lazy person.
Kevin,
I
you
admit
should
that
have.
freely.
Sorry to interrupt, but another part of the answer to your question, Kevin, is that you should read Josh's book.
That's
That's
right, yeah.
absolutely. Ask Todd. I buy everybody's books. I buy them all. It's my problem. I have lots of problems. That's a top three.
It's a good problem to have.
Yes, it is. And Doctor, I wanted to ask you, Barbara Tuchman, who is a historian of the 20th century, World War I, wrote a book on grand strategy. I think it was on grand strategy. And it is about the blunders of history. And one of the big blunders of history was the Trojan horse. And even though that has kind of a mythical formation to it, she says it was factual, and that the hubris of the Trojans, believing that the Greeks were leaving, and the psyops and the military intel of floating off into the horizon, that contributed to the fall of Troy, just as much as the defeat, the military defeat of their leader. Do you have any comments on Tuchman's work?
Well, I'm not familiar with it, but from what you said, I can't agree that the Trojan horse was real. But if it was real, I would agree with her. That was a crazy thing to do, to bring this massive wooden statue of a horse that could hold at least a dozen men inside of it into your city and then not investigate. Or now, the story of the Trojan horse, it was written down in another epic like the Iliad and the Odyssey, but we actually lost that epic. And so we know the story of the Trojan horse because later scholars wrote down summaries of that epic, but we don't actually have the original story like we do for the Iliad. And so there's some pieces to that story that we have to assume we just don't have because we're only working with a summary. But in those summaries that we do have, we hear things like Cassandra, this Trojan princess, said, "Hey, there's Greeks in there. That's dangerous. Don't do this."
Right.
But Cassandra was cursed. Now, this is mythological, not tactical.
Right.
Cassandra was cursed such that even though she could know things, she could see the future, she could understand stuff that nobody else could understand, her curse was that no one would ever believe her. So the moment she said, "There's people in there," I was like, well, then there must not be anybody in there. Right? So, and there's other examples like this. There's a priest called Lycoon who also says, I fear the Greeks even when bearing gifts. And then snakes immediately kill him and his sons because the gods sent the snakes because they didn't want the Trojan horse to be to be. So mythologically speaking, the Trojans are actually kind of forgivable here. But if you strip the mythology away, yes, it's a pretty unforgivable blunder. And I'll say one more thing about it. There is an argument out there, which I don't necessarily like, but I think it's worth mentioning, that while there was no Trojan horse, the memory of the Trojan horse could be evidence of early siegecraft. Instead of an actual horse that hid troops inside of it, it was maybe like a siege tower or a covered battering ram or some other type of large wooden structure that got into cities, and then it became misremembered as a Trojan horse.
Fascinating. I recommend Barbara Tuchman to everybody, especially around World War I. The last thing is, Renee, your grandson doesn't look that tough. It looks like you took him 2 out of 3 falls. I got a lot of respect for that. I just wanted to mention that. That's all.
This is Renee Gefkin. I'm going to ask her to unmute. Renee, I believe, were you a donut dolly?
No, I was a psych tech in the Navy.
A Navy, okay, that's it. And you were Marines, and they were always friendly towards you.
Yes. Of course, I was beautiful, so what can I say?
I'm sorry, I muted you. Speaking of beautiful, Josh, let's talk about Helen. The title of your book is Fatal Second Helen. What does that mean? Why did you choose that title?
Well, actually, it was Ethan's idea. And I
Mm.
remember we were exchanging emails about this, and I maybe had 5 or 6 ideas, and he maybe threw an equal number. I don't remember the exact poem by Patrick Shaw Stewart, a World War One casualty, a British gentleman. And his story is fascinating, and I'll try to tell it quickly. So he was fighting in Gallipoli, I believe, and he was given 3 days of leave, and he took that leave on an island called Imbros. That's the Greek name for it. The Turkish name is much harder to pronounce. And so he took that leave on this little island in the North Aegean, right across from Troy. So he couldn't see Troy, but he could look across the sea and see the shore of Troy, so to speak. And he, like many World War One British troops, had been classically trained. So he had read the Iliad and he'd read the Odyssey and understood it all very well. And so he writes this poem while he is on leave. He goes home back to England. He puts the poem in his desk. He just folds it up and puts it in his desk. And then he volunteers to go back to war in France, still World War One. And he's killed there. He's killed by shrapnel in southern France. And his poem is later discovered by his family in the desk drawer where he left it, and so they publish it posthumously. And so it doesn't have a title. We don't know what he wanted to call it, but it's often called "Stand in the Trench Achilles," or sometimes it's called "I Saw a Man This Morning." And I just love the poem because he talks about how terrible a battle is. And the most powerful line in the poem is he calls upon Achilles to come save him. Like, because I didn't mention this, but in the Iliad, Achilles, when he does come back to battle, he saves the Greeks because they're about to lose. And he basically comes at the last minute and saves everybody. And so here is this British army soldier with 3 days vacation, knowing that he has to go back into battle and calling on Achilles to come save him. And this is so vulnerable and so emotional. And I really wanted to connect. I have the poem in my book and I write about it. And I really wanted to, I connected with that poem, even though it was written more than 100 years ago. I connected with that poem very deeply and I wanted some piece of it. So I shared the poem with Ethan and we had selected a couple different lines from the poem and he had selected Fatal Second Helen. And I remember reading that email and he'd given me maybe like 4 or 5 ideas and Fatal Second Helen was like the second or third, I forget where it was, somewhere in the middle. And I stopped right there. I was like, that's it. That's what I really like. And I remember we tossed a couple more around, but in the back of my mind, I was like, I can't get over Fatal Second Helen. And so I love it because it's kind of evocative. And it's also a little bit mysterious. Like you say, okay, I know Helen is in the Iliad, but what's the fatality here? And why is there a second Helen? And to Patrick Shaw Stewart, the idea that he had to go back to World War One, that there was, I mean, he doesn't say what his Helen was, but you could say his Helen was that he was conscripted. So the Greeks went to Troy to save Helen, or the Greeks went to battle to save Helen, and Patrick Shaw Stewart went to battle because he had to, but he recognized that it could be fatal. And so I was really attracted to that phrasing. I liked how it was, I think Ethan and I talked about how it kind of grabbed your attention because it's not exactly, my initial idea was let's just call it Veterans Iliad. And then the fatal part, that the very first word in the title, it reminds you, as Patrick Shaw Stewart knew all too well, that war is destructive. And that's a message that I think that the Iliad says to us, and that's a message that my book says to us.
Did you have a Helen?
The stupidity and youth of an 18-year-old.
That's it. Yeah.
I rushed into the Marine. I graduated high school and I was in boot camp 2 weeks later. I rushed.
Was there a different, okay, so you were in on the invasion of Iraq, but then you went again in 2004. Were you older and wiser by then? I mean, did you know what by then for that second tour, what war was about? Did you have more trepidation maybe?
I would hesitate to say wiser. And I also I didn't have much trepidation. And the reason for that was when I went to battle, and I'd be really curious if other veterans can talk about this tonight. When I went to battle, it almost became like I detached from myself and was watching it all on TV.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm brave, because bravery is doing it even when you're afraid. I wasn't brave, but I was never afraid.
Hmm.
And stuff was exploding and people were getting hurt and chaos, right? And I just said to myself, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, go get into the bunker, go get behind that wall, go do what you need to do to protect yourself, but that's all you got to do. And I'm really, really lucky that I was right. Right? I'm really lucky that I was right. So many people, unfortunately, who maybe thought that way did not necessarily get to be that lucky. And so the trepidation was never there. And I remember seeing other people being afraid and saying, "Whew, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about that part. I got enough to worry about with I don't need to worry about the being afraid part." And so, yeah, when I went back over, I was not afraid. I wasn't excited. Like, I was not the type, I didn't want to go kill people. That never entered my mind. And that's why I went to Intel. I was not infantry, right? Very purposefully not infantry. Not that infantry people are bloodlust, murderers. I'm not certainly saying that, but, um, so yeah, when I went back, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I knew exactly what was going to happen. So there was some, I would say experience, but I wouldn't say wiser.
Why is that interesting? Yeah, we call that disassociation, Josh.
Mhm.
Right, when you kind of zoom out from yourself and you're not quite there,
Mhm.
100%. Do we have other comments, questions from people? Questions for Josh? Larry, how you doing, Larry?
I'm fine. Josh, I'm a Vietnam vet, so we're not contemporaries, but I have a good friend who was in Iraq the same time you were.
Mhm.
So I immediately texted him and told him you were on and what you were doing, and did he know you?
Yeah,
He
well,
texted back and said, yes, he and his wife both know you. It's Lee Wagner and Ariana Wagner.
oh my, I'm great friends with Ariana. Yeah,
And
that's
they've
small
already
world.
bought. So I told them about your book and what you're talking about, and they
Right
said,
on.
"Oh yeah, we already ordered it." So I already got the
Right.
book. So now I feel guilty, so I have to get the book as well. I just wanted to
Well, thank
let you know.
you.
Yeah, I just wanted to see whether or not you might have known each other because I know he was in the same when you were there, he was a truck driver and he was driving the same thing. And he talks about stopping at one of the Saddam's palaces, and he has some artifacts that he sort of lifted from the palace and brought home. And so I was just curious. And when he immediately texted back and said, yes, he did know you, and Ariana knew you very well from Pitt, and they've already got your book. So
It's a
well
small
done.
Right.
world.
Well, people buying Josh's book is what I want to hear about.
Yeah, publisher.
Yeah.
Now, look, I put a link to Josh's book here, and you could read an
Yeah.
excerpt from it. It's not a big book. But it really is engaging. It's easy to read. There it is, thin little book. It's got pictures too, for those of you who like picture books.
Here's a picture of Achilles' shield created by one of my students at Pitt.
Yeah.
How wonderful. Yeah, so I really do encourage you to read it
Yeah.
because it really is. It's one of these wonderful timeless stories, and to have a young vet be the one kind of being your companion through the story is really
Yeah.
a special thing.
Todd, could I add a little point about the cover? Could we put the cover up on the?
Yeah.
I just want to do a shout out to the Sean Robertson, who was the designer who did that cover. He's South African and he's our cover designer of choice at Blue Air Books. He's world class. He's really, really good at what he does. And he and Josh and I had a good three-way conversation that led to this cover. And besides you were talking about the cover early on and the helicopters at the top and the ancient warrior and then the marine and on at the bottom. Sean put a great deal of really thoughtful time into conceiving and offering versions of this. And then when he the way I remember it is it's sort of towards the end of the process of going through iterations and drafts, the penny dropped for Sean and he's like, this is the cover. He just felt really, really strongly about it, and he offered it to me and Josh, and we both just were kind of awestruck. Yeah, people do judge books by covers, and this is I'm just delighted and proud.
And book design and cover art is a specialty in and of itself.
Yeah.
Is, the ability to take, again, like kind of abstract and complex book subjects and render them visually so that the reader gets an immediate sense of the tone of the book, the content of the book. It really is a special art. And I know Sean is a genius at it.
Yeah.
So it's a carefully crafted book.
And it does justice to the book that Josh put so much of himself into writing.
Josh, may I suggest a sequel?
Well, the obvious sequel would be something about the Odyssey, I suppose.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm following in Jonathan Shea's footsteps, a man I greatly admire. I don't have nearly as close a relationship with the Odyssey as I do with the Iliad. I did not read the Odyssey as a middle schooler because the Iliad was all I wanted.
Maybe it's time now that you've matured a bit that you move on to a book that doesn't have so much, so many. It has a lot of action scenes, but it's a more subdued book about coming home.
I mean, the Odyssey is fascinating, and I don't mean to insult it. And I did read it, and I've taught it before. I just can't. It doesn't grab me.
It doesn't grab you the way that the Iliad does. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. And I think I have not made enough of Brad Washabaw's Being in His Dress Blues on this Marine Corps birthday. Brad, you look absolutely fabulous. As Barb said, what a handsome man you are.
Well, there was a Cary town luncheon on Friday, so I just happened to have it handy. So I thought I'd throw it on real quick, and I have not had this uniform on for 20 years. So I thought today on the Marine Corps birthday, why not break it out and put it on again?
And I thought on this Marine Corps birthday, I'll give you a compliment, and that's the last one I'll give you. So
thank you. That's appreciated. Yeah.
What a show off wearing his blues. Holy cow.
Exactly.
Well, it's a hell of a ribbon stack, I have to say.
Yeah, I'll say. Amen.
Well, how many years, Brad, in the
That's 29 years, and service in Beirut, Desert Storm, Joint Special Operations, recruiting duty, CO School of Infantry, CO Infantry Training Battalion. Just a great career. Promoted to colonel by General Mattis. Just a great career around great Marines who I still keep in touch with. It's a great brotherhood, and I'm just so glad I had the chance to be part of it.
I write about General Mattis in my second chapter. I didn't meet him, but I got to be there when he gave a speech to us in Kuwait, and it had a really big impact on me. He was Major General Mattis at the time.
Yeah, I first knew him, he was a major. He almost fired me twice, but I survived his wrath.
Todd?
Yes, Glenn.
So hopefully it's not too late to ask this question, but yesterday I went and saw the movie Nuremberg, and there's been a couple of emails in our email, and I replied to them today with my thoughts on the movie. Right, great movie. History, yeah, not so much. There's no movie that can be made that would cover all of that. My question to Josh is, what sort of movies, what sort of Hollywood treatise of the Iliad and the Odyssey, or at least the Iliad, would you recommend any, or are they all trash?
No, well, I'm actually really glad you asked this question because it's something I've been thinking about a lot this fall. I'm teaching a class at Pitt called Ancient Epic, and I'm teaching Gilgamesh, we're almost done now. I taught Gilgamesh, I taught the Iliad, and we're finishing the Aeneid next week. And the Aeneid is essentially the Roman version of these books. And I was talking to my department chair, the classics chair, and said, I want to do a fourth text, but I don't want it to be a book because that's maybe too much reading. And he said, well, what about a movie? And I said, oh, great. That's a great idea. I'll do a movie. And so I started thinking, like, what would be, if you do those three books, what's the natural fourth movie? And I landed on Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood.
Oh, wow.
Because for two reasons, which are very closely related. If you haven't, I'm sure most of us have seen it, but if you haven't seen it, it's a pretty basic story. Clint Eastwood is a retired gunslinger, or not even gunslinger, kind of a criminal. And he's living, I think it's Wyoming, I forget exactly where, but he's living out there by himself, raising his young kids, even though he's probably in his 60s or so. And he gets this opportunity to do one more bounty to become a bounty hunter, and kind of against his will, he takes it and he recruits Morgan Freeman to come help him. And in the process of it all, Morgan Freeman gets killed, is captured and killed by Gene Hackman, no less, who's just tearing up the scenery all through this movie. And he basically gets his revenge. And one of the greatest scenes in movie history, if we've seen it, when he walks into the bar at the end of the movie. And so we can kind of map that onto the Iliad. So obviously Clint Eastwood is Achilles, Morgan Freeman is Patroclus, Gene Hackman is Hector. And so there's kind of like this mapping that you can do. It's not perfect, but it's relatively close. But the other reason I chose, well, also there's a third reason. Unforgiven is just an amazing movie. But the second reason that I chose that movie was when Homer wrote down the Iliad and Alexander and everybody else was reading it, they were imagining a mythological past, but one that wasn't too far back in time. Just a little bit back in time, you know. And that's why if you look at Greek vase painting, all of the heroes of the Iliad look a lot like the Greeks that were writing them down. They look like hoplites, like this hoplite on the book right here, right? You know, that's not what they would have looked like in the when the Trojan War took place, but that's okay. So the Greeks knew the Iliad took place in the past, but it was a close past. It was their people, a close and mythological past. Well, that's what the Wild West is to us. Right, it's our history. It's American history. We can recognize Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok and William Money, who is Eastwood's name in Unforgiven, and we recognize that they're different. Right, they wear different clothing. Maybe they speak a little bit differently, and they shoot each other with six killers or six shooters. I knew a guy named Six Killer, so that's why I jumped in my head. If you're a Marine and your last name is Six Killer, you're going to be popular. That was a good last name to have in the Marine Corps. But we also relate. We say that was maybe not our great great grandparents, but maybe our great 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 grandparents. But those are Americans doing things in the near and mythological past. And so I thought Unforgiven was an excellent. I'm patting myself in the back here, but I thought Unforgiven was a great choice. If you want the closest thing America has now to an Iliad, I don't know that you can do better than Unforgiven. But I will also mention the movie Troy, 2004, I think.
Oh yeah,
with Brad Pitt and Eric Bana. Yeah. I mean, that's right on the nose. They're not. That is a movie about the Iliad. They're not. You know, there's no analogies or metaphors whatsoever. I'll say this: most classicists don't like the movie, but I do like the movie because it focused on some really interesting topics that the Iliad thought were very valuable. Achilles' wrath and his pride, I think, well represented. Hector being this approachable, like Eric Bana, you like him. He's a tough guy. He wins all of his fights except the last one, but he gets beat up a little bit and he has doubts and insecurities. So you as an audience member connect with Eric Bana as Hector more than you do with Brad Pitt as Achilles. And then they do this really clever thing, which does not take place in the Iliad, but as you all probably know, Achilles does die at the war at Troy, and he is shot in the heel by Paris, the prince that stole Helen, Hector's younger brother. And in Troy, they have Brad Pitt storming Troy, which Achilles never did, but that's okay. They have Brad Pitt storming Troy, and he gets shot twice in the chest by arrows, shot by Paris, played by Orlando Bloom, and he gets shot in the heel. And he's so tough that he just knocks the arrows out of his own chest. He doesn't, take the arrow out of his heel, and he keeps walking towards Paris, but eventually he dies because he got shot in the heart. And so when the Greeks would have found Brad Pitt's body, or Brad Pitt, Achilles' body, the only arrow that they saw was the one in his heel. So they would have been like, oh, what? He got killed by a shot to the heel? This is Achilles. That doesn't make any sense. And I thought that was a really clever homage to the way Achilles actually died.
Josh, you talk about Rambo in the book.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so Rambo, the first Rambo now, big difference. Just like the first Rocky versus, I do love Rocky 3, but Rocky 1 is it's a different movie, a very different movie. So I'm sure we've all seen the first Rambo. When Rambo decides to fight back, I mean, Rambo, thank you, Ethan, actually. Rambo would be another one, actually, right? It doesn't necessarily have that mythological past because I think it's like late 70s, Washington State, or I forget where he is exactly, in the Northwest. But when Rambo decides to turn it on, they can't do anything about it, right? For the rest of the movie, he's just having his way with the National Guard or whoever, and in the sheriff's office, whoever they're sending against him. And that essence of like unstoppability, he can't be hurt, or if he is hurt, he doesn't care. He doesn't miss when he shoots at you. That's Achilles, right? That is absolutely
Yeah.
the way the Greeks, the way we think of Rambo, is the way the Greeks would have thought of Achilles. And then obviously the subsequent Rambo movies just kind of keep amping up that attitude. And I don't know how far you could take it with Achilles, but in Rambo 3, when he takes on the Russian army all by himself, yeah, I mean that's kind of Achilles fighting against the Trojans all by himself. Also, I would say so Rambo is based off of a book. I forget the author's name now. Starts with a I forget, and I'm sorry that I forget. It's a great book. If you like the movie, go read the book.
First Blood, as Greg Yost says, it's called First Blood.
Yes, yes, that's true. It's not Rambo. You're right. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ethan Casey. What a wonderful conversation. I'm going to paraphrase Glenn Flickinger and say to you that you received more than your fair share of brain cells, and I'm not happy about that. But it really is. What a fascinating conversation with such an intelligent, learned, wonderfully sensitive and curious Marine. We're really grateful that you spent the time with us, and thank you, Ethan, also for joining us from Seattle to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, happy Marine Corps birthday to everybody. Happy all the best. I'm not going to say Happy Veterans Day because Jim Roberts is here, but I'm going to say I hope you all have a meaningful Veterans Day tomorrow.